Revealed, how a janitor's daughter transformed a CEO's panic into a $1 million opportunity. Emma's hands trembled as she adjusted her blouse in the corporate restroom, her reflection a stark contrast to the polished world she had just entered. The sleek walls whispered tales of success, but she could barely hear over the pounding of her heart. For years, she'd scrubbed floors in office buildings, a janitor's daughter barely functioning in a realm designed for the privileged. Today, she was an intern at a prestigious tech company, a title that ignited hope and transformed into a gnawing fear. How had she arrived here? Was she competent enough? With each step she took into the sprawling office, she felt out of place. The sharp suits and expensive watches made her self-doubt surge, tightening like a vice around her chest. She could hear the murmurs that painted her as just the intern, a temporary visitor in a world that didn't even acknowledge her potential. What did a girl from a small town and a life of humble labor know about technology or high-stakes decisions? Her father's lessons of integrity echoed in her mind, but could values truly equal success? The day spiraled into chaos when the news of a crippling data breach began to filter through the sleek halls. Emma listened as frantic whispers filled the air, the panic infecting everyone except for her. As the company's CEO, James, paced back and forth, his anxiety became palpable. She felt the weight of his worry grounding her. Unlike her peers who held their privilege with ease, Emma understood struggle. There was a moment of connection, but it was quickly shattered by her own spiraling thoughts. What if she spoke up? A voice deep within her whispered that she had something to offer, yet another quaked with doubt. If she shared her insights, would he brush them aside because she was just the intern? The fear clawed at her insides. The impending disaster loomed over the company like a storm, and she wasn't sure she could face its wrath. But what if no one else saw the solution that she did? Each passing moment amplified her inner turmoil. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, with every delay, her heart raced and her thoughts rallied, an invisible war spiraling within her. The deadline for a solution was closing in, and as the time ticked, Emma felt a suffocating embrace of despair. If she kept quiet now, could she live with herself? Every lesson her father had taught her about resilience urged her to step forward, but self-doubt pulled her back like quicksand. The skeptics in the room had her questioning every piece of herself. Did she really belong here? The moment of reckoning arrived as James caught her eye, desperation mingling with uncertainty. Emma felt the heat rise within her. The urge to stand up and convey her idea was clashing violently with the impulse to retreat. Would she falter or fight? Swallowing hard, she knew that silence would seal not just her fate but also the future of the company itself. Still, the finality of her choice blanketed her with dread. Standing at the crossroads of opportunity and fear, her stomach flipped. She needed to leap, but could she? Would her voice break through the layers of privilege, or would she be remembered only as just the janitor's daughter? The audience waited, the unseen stakes held within their lingering gazes. As Emma readied herself to step into the light, the inevitable moment of truth bore down upon her as she grappled with the crushing need to prove herself. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she locked eyes with James, whose desperation mirrored her own internal battle. In that heartbeat, time stretched, and all her fears crystallized into a single, powerful realization: this was her moment. Before she could second-guess herself any further, she took a step forward, the gaze of her colleagues pressing against her like a weight. "James, if I could just," the words tumbled out before she could stop them, but seeing the flicker of interest ignited a spark within her. His brows furrowed, and she pressed on, feeling the rhythm of her heart synchronizing with a newfound resolve. "I believe we can leverage the last data backup and possibly restore the critical systems. I remember my father demonstrating something similar when we faced power outages at the cleaning service. It worked then, and I think it can work now." A ripple of surprise washed across the room, followed by a silence so thick it felt suffocating. They weren't expecting insight from her, that much was clear. James tilted his head, intrigued. He motioned for her to continue, and for the first time, Emma felt the crowd's skepticism shift into quiet interest. As she elaborated her suggestion, pulling from the depths of her memory and instincts, each word became clearer, empowered by the urgency of the situation. She recalled the way her father would calmly approach every setback, treating it as a puzzle to solve rather than a looming disaster. As she spoke, her confidence built, layering over self-doubt like armor, giving her the courage to stand in this conference room that buzzed with apprehension. For a moment, she saw their faces transform from doubt to contemplation. If she could simply hold on to that thread of connection to her past, maybe she didn't just belong here, she had a place to carve for herself amidst this chaos. "Backing up our systems may cause some downtime," she elaborated, "but getting the security measures in place will ultimately save us." The room erupted into a flurry of conversation as colleagues began to dissect her proposal. Emma stood taller, adrenaline pumping through her veins, her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps this was what they meant by stepping up. The fear that had once gripped her was now mingling with a palpable sense of hope. As James directed the team to implement her suggestion, Emma couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. Was she beginning to discover her worth in this high-flying world? The air shifted as she stepped back into the background, allowing the experts to take over, but she remained vigilant, ready to provide further input if needed. That experience flickered like a beacon within her heart. She didn't just want to be the janitor's daughter, she wanted to prove that she was more than her past. Each time someone looked to her for ideas, she sensed the chaos retreating just a bit. But as the hours wasted under the veil of looming uncertainty faded, so did the clarity that had brightened Emma's resolve. While the immediate crisis seemed subdued, the undercurrents of power dynamics began to rise again. Emma sensed tensions brewing among the executives as a wave of blame shifted their way, and she knew her job was far from over. Was she capable of navigating this turbulent terrain inhabited by those who saw her as inferior? The challenge ahead made her stomach flip again, determination surged through her. She could rise, again and again, this was merely the beginning. After all, she had made her mark. The question now lingered like a shadow, how far could she go, and at what cost? Just as the clock approached midnight in the conference room, a sudden argument broke out among the higher-ups over the implications of her initiative. As tempers flared and tone escalated, Emma watched, heart thudding, at the precipice of yet another defining moment. Would she step in again, or would she let them navigate this conflict on their own? The chaos in the conference room intensified, the sharp voices clashing against the sterile walls like thunder. Emma's heart raced, both from the excitement of her initial success and the dread that followed the rising tension. She shifted in her seat, poised between the urge to intervene and the instinct to remain an observer. This time, she wasn't just there to provide a suggestion, she was on the brink of something significantly larger. "Listen, this is not about who is to blame," one executive shouted, his face reddening. "We need solutions, not accusations." Emma's mind whirled. She debated stepping in, the memory of her father's reassuring voice breaking through the din. "Don't get lost in the noise, Em. Find clarity." A flash of inspiration struck her. Perhaps this was her moment to reclaim the narrative, to not only assert her presence but to offer a way forward. James stood at the head of the table, attempting to mediate, yet his frustrated glances revealed that he felt overwhelmed. It was then Emma's thoughts crystallized. She could use this discord as a catalyst for collaboration. "Excuse me," she interjected, her voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging around her. All eyes turned to her, a mixture of surprise and skepticism swirling in the air. This was her chance, but doubts whispered that she wasn't enough to quell the tempest. "Instead of pointing fingers, let us focus on what we can control," she suggested, her words flowing from a well of strategy built from both her life and work experiences. "We have a framework for restoring the backup, and if I may add, there's room to optimize our systems in the process." A brief silence followed, as if the executives had forgotten how to properly react to her presence. Slowly, James' expression shifted from doubt to a glimmer of recognition. "That's right," he agreed. "We can restructure the timeline to ensure all departments align with Emma's strategy." Emma felt the power of that moment fill the room. Maybe now, they would see her differently. As she elaborated on her ideas, integrating insights from the ongoing argument, she could sense a shift. Executives began to nod, murmurs of agreement punctuating her points. She spoke passionately about leveraging their resources while addressing the executive grind of egos, highlighting the necessity of teamwork, something her father's business had thrived on. Memory fueled her conviction as she reflected on the nights spent in the service's bustling environment. Understanding every scrim of information led to smoother operations and happier customers, yet, a troublesome thought lingered in the back of her mind. Would these high-powered executives truly embrace her approach? The nagging concern brought her back momentarily, vying with the exhilarating rush of being at the forefront of their discourse. As discussions turned dynamic once more, Emma's heart filled with a recognition of her true worth. The power dynamics of the room had subtly transformed. She felt less like an outsider and more like an essential component. The team took her input seriously, which sparked a newfound determination in her soul. Hours passed in a blur of strategy and collaboration, and it became evident that they were moving toward a unified plan rooted in her original idea. As the clock struck 3 and the energy in the room shifted, Emma realized she had succeeded in not only integrating herself within the group but also in transforming critical thought processes. But even as the fixation on success anchored her spirit, doubt raised its head again. What new dynamics would emerge in light of her contributions? Would her standing shift permanently, or was this merely a fleeting victory in a sea filled with sharks? Just as they wrapped up the plan and began to celebrate the common ground they found, James leaned closer to her, his voice low but loaded with weight. "Emma, this is just the beginning. We need you to lead this next phase. Are you ready for that?" Her heart skipped. Was she truly prepared to step into a role that demanded more than she'd ever dreamed? Feeling the weight of their collective expectations, she inhaled deeply, contemplating the magnitude of what lay before her. I think I am," she replied hesitantly, repressing the tremors of doubt within, but as she spoke, a chill coursed through her, awakening a cold realization. Stepping up meant facing the skepticism and pitfalls of authority head-on. The moment of truth was approaching and the ultimatum quickly settled in her mind. Could she maintain this momentum, or would the undercurrents pull her back into insignificance? The pending challenge loomed as no one truly understood the weight of transformation until it tested the depths of their character. Emma stared at the roadmap she had just sketched during the meeting. The vivid colors of her notes became blurred as her thoughts spiraled into an uncertainty laced with exhilaration. Could she truly navigate this uncharted territory? The once vibrant excitement of making her mark now felt like a tightrope walk over an abyss, the weight pressing heavily on her resolve. Leading a phase of the project meant more than just overseeing tasks, it meant rallying the team around a common goal, establishing a network of trust in a domain where skepticism seemed to thrive. It was a delicate dance, and she questioned if her steps would leave her balanced or tumbling down the slope of doubt. The lingering echo of James' voice reverberated in her mind, urging her forward yet tethering her to the very real fear of failure. In the days that followed, Emma found herself immersed in an accelerated rhythm of meetings and strategizing. Discussions about budget allocations felt like wrestling with wild animals as each calculative decision revealed breathtaking vulnerabilities. The familiar faces of her colleagues morphed into formidable competitors, their ambitions colliding with her own. They were seasoned, each dissenting opinion fired off like a tactical strike aimed to unsteady her newfound footing. During a weekly check-in, Emma faced Greg, the head of finance. His sardonic smile always hinted at hidden agendas, and now, she sensed a challenge in his questioning. "So tell me, Emma, how do you plan to recover our losses and keep this team motivated? Are you sure you can handle that responsibility?" His words hung heavy, almost suffocating. Emma took a breath, fighting the urge to retreat into niceties. This was her moment to reconstruct the narrative that had defined her thus far. "I believe that when challenges arise, our team can rise to meet them. Let us utilize our diverse strengths and innovative ideas instead of allowing fear to dictate our actions. By doing so, we not only recover losses but propel ourselves beyond expectations. The room fell silent. Greg's eyes narrowed, masking the begrudging respect creeping into the atmosphere. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and Emma felt the tide shift between them. Each meeting thereafter became an opportunity for her to assert herself, to challenge the staid perceptions her colleagues had of her. Emma embraced her role and her stakes elevated each time she spoke, yet the underneath churned with the realization, she was distancing herself from the version of her who had been content to observe, uncertain whether it was truly for the best that as days turned to weeks. Emma found herself increasingly drawn into the whirlwind of leadership conflicting with her desire to retain her authenticity. In meetings, veiled competitiveness and strategic subterfuge colored each discussion. Her new position had opened doors to collaboration but presented equally fortified walls built from distrust and doubt. Late one night, as she pored over reports in her small office, she recalled her father's words once more: "Stay true to your vision." The truth of that notion sparked a flicker in her overloaded mind. Perhaps it was time to re-examine her approach and meld her strategies with a lived authenticity rather than merely following suit. What if she embraced who she inherently was rather than shaping herself to fit a mold of expectation? With newfound clarity, Emma crafted a plan. She would initiate a team-building workshop that focused on open communication, fostering trust to bridge the gap between her colleagues and herself. Perhaps it was time to dismantle the armor of skepticism around her and evoke a collective spirit that could unite rather than divide. Yet as she envisioned this, fear crept back in. What if they resisted her overtures? Determination surged through her veins as she pushed aside the whispering doubts. Recapturing control of her narrative felt paramount not just for her aspirations but for a team that needed leadership grounded in authenticity. As her fingers danced across her keyboard to finalize the workshop proposal, the weight of the unknown loomed heavily, leaving her tinged with both anticipation and dread. Would her colleagues embrace this new approach, or would this be the moment where she stitched the distance between herself and her dream too tightly? The stakes were high, and as she hit send on the workshop invitation, a thrill shot through her. The next chapter awaited, full of both perilous confrontation and the potential for revelation. Would she find her footing or slip into obscurity once more? Emma steeled herself. She was ready to find out. The sun spilled golden light through the tall windows, illuminating Emma's small office. Days had passed since she sent out the workshop invitation, but the anticipation felt more like a simmering pressure cooker than an exciting build-up. Her calendar buzzed with reminders. Preparation for the session began to consume her thoughts. As she finalized her materials, Emma's internal dialogue grew more critical. Would her colleagues be receptive to her ideas? It was one thing to envision trust-building tactics and another entirely to see them embraced by a group steeped in competition and protective skepticism. The vibrant enthusiasm she had initially felt began to wane under the weight of this uncertainty. She scrolled through the responses to her invitation, paying close attention to any glimmers of enthusiasm. Greg had accepted with a curt acknowledgement, but the absence of an additional note felt like a dismissal. It stung, echoing her fears that his earlier respect had been a mirage. With a few days remaining before the workshop, Emma approached her team with a sense of urgency. The morning meeting on the day before was a crucial chance to gather insights, although a palpable tension hung in the air. Each voice that chimed in felt like a calculated maneuver, designed to both contribute and undercut. Let us explore what you believe our biggest roadblocks are, Emma started, attempting to sound confident as her team members shared their thoughts. What she received was a volley of complaints wrapped in veiled criticisms, subtle jabs that made it painfully clear they still perceived her as an outsider. Emma, with all due respect, don't you think a team where everyone feels heard will just lead to chaos? Trust doesn't equate to productivity, Carl, the project manager with an assertive presence, interjected. Wincing slightly, Emma considered his words, recognizing the fear embedded within them. I see your point, Carl. But could we not harness this level of frustration to stimulate genuine innovation? She retorted, surprised by her own boldness. As discussions continued, Emma realized just how deeply ingrained their skepticism was. It became clear that surface-level disagreements masked larger ethical fractures. Could they have been so consumed by their individual ambitions that they had lost sight of their shared goals? After the meeting, Emma wondered how she could help them analyze this undercurrent of conflict. With her father's words still echoing in her mind, she reflected on her own experiences, how she had worked through her doubts and come to trust her instincts. She decided then to customize the workshop to include not just team-building exercises but also reflection on personal narratives, allowing each member to share their journey, the struggles they faced and the victories they achieved. This could spark empathy and perhaps reveal commonalities beneath the surface tensions. Yet, as she finalized these adaptations, unsettling thoughts crept back in. Was it possible that she was overstepping? Her colleagues weren't adversaries, they were collaborators, and yet every instinct warned her against being labeled as too soft. Would this personal sharing weaken her stance or strengthen their resolve to work together? The night before the workshop, Emma barely slept. Images of her colleagues' scrutinizing glares and dismissive opinions flooded her mind. In the dim light of her office, she grappled with anxiety and self-doubt. She had cast aside the armor of skepticism during her planning. What if it only further alienated her from her peers? It was during one of these restless moments that her phone buzzed. A message from Greg arrived, looking forward to seeing how this works out. I hope you realize the stakes involved. Her heart raced, a mixture of anticipation and dread. The stakes, indeed, were high. Emma took a deep breath and steadied her resolve. She would walk into that workshop armed not just with strategies but with the vulnerability of her own journey, ready to forge connections that could be transformative. The workshop awaited her, a moment of reckoning. But just as she felt a flicker of hope, another aspect loomed larger in her mind. What if Barbara, the most outspoken critic of her plans, decided to undermine everything she had built? Would the clarity of her vision withstand the challenge under the scrutiny of her rivals? As she closed her laptop, the stakes crystallized once more, both professional and deeply personal. Tomorrow would send her spiraling into an arena of confrontation where she would either reaffirm her leadership or find herself questioning everything she had fought for. Would she rise to the occasion? The answer loomed just out of reach, leaving her poised on the edge of revelation. As the workshop day dawned, Emma's mind raced with a kaleidoscope of thoughts. She slipped into her tailored blazer, each button fastening her resolve a little tighter. Today was the culmination of her efforts, a stage set for not just interaction but confrontation with the complex dynamics that had simmered beneath the surface for too long. Arriving early, she took a moment to steady herself, breathing in the faint smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. The room was a blank canvas, an opportunity waiting to be painted with honest dialogue and newfound connections. Emma arranged the seating in a circle, a deliberate act intended to foster inclusivity. No corners to hide in, no one to lean back and disengage. As her colleagues filed in, she noticed the familiar faces illuminated with skepticism and competition. Their banter was laced with tension, each greeting a potential challenge. Greg sauntered in last, the arch of his brows suggesting he harbored doubts. Barbara, with her sharp gaze, already loomed in the background like a lurking storm cloud. Emma's heart clenched at the sight. "Welcome, everyone," Emma began, her voice steady despite the inner tumult. "Today we're going to explore what it means to build trust within our team and how that can lead to unlocking our true potential." She forced a smile, hoping it would project the confidence she desperately felt she needed to embody. As she introduced the first activity, a simple icebreaker where everyone would share one personal item they had brought, her internal voice critiqued her choice. Was this too soft? Would they feel it was a waste of time? Yet, as they spoke, something unexpected began to happen. The initial awkwardness melted away when she encouraged vulnerability. Greg revealed his grandmother's diary, a source of inspiration during tough times. Even Carl slowly shared a childhood memento of his first science fair project, igniting laughter and fostering connection. Emma's heart lifted. These moments, however small, were bridges she had hoped to create, but as the workshop progressed to the deeper exercises intended to confront their barriers, Emma encountered her first real challenge. Barbara, arms crossed defiantly, stood up and addressed the room. "Where is the logic in this? Sharing feelings won't solve our issues. We're here to work efficiently, not hold hands." Emma felt the rush of adrenaline, fear clashing with determination. It would be easy to crumble under Barbara's scrutiny, to retreat into the safety of her ideas. But as memories of her father's unwavering encouragement flashed through her mind, she realized this was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just her workshop on the line, it was her identity as a leader. "Barbara, I understand your concerns. But I believe that acknowledging our personal stories will reveal the underlying motivations that drive our work. How can we move forward without understanding what drives each of us?" Emma countered, her voice gaining strength. She saw the slight shifting of the room's energy. At that moment, others began to express their guarded thoughts, contributing to the growing dialogue surrounding personal vulnerabilities in the professional environment. Midway through the session, Emma tasked them with identifying their core values, the very pieces that formed the foundation of their professional personas. She watched as they engaged in this exercise, the atmosphere thickening with introspection. Conversations about trust and transparency bubbled to the surface, revealing the anxieties lurking beneath the competition, but before an organic sense of unity could solidify, Barbara interjected once more, a frown etched on her face. "Isn't this just a distraction? These exercises won't change the outcome of our projects. We need results, not feelings." In that moment, tension crackled in the room. Emma's throat tightened, and she felt a wave of self-doubt crash over her. Had she misjudged the approach? Should she have chosen a different strategy, one more aligned with their usual working style? But as she stood before her colleagues, a realization formed. This workshop wasn't merely about results, it was about transformation, her transformation and theirs. The vulnerability, the stories, the confessions shared weren't signs of weakness, they were pathways to deeper collaboration. She would not apologize for her vision. Taking a deep breath, Emma found her voice again. "Barbara, I respect your perspective and the urgency to deliver results. But let us consider this: how can we effectively collaborate if we don't understand each other's values and strengths? True productivity starts with trust." The room fell silent, each colleague suddenly riveted by the intensity of their interaction. Whatever doubt remained about Emma began to dissolve in that charged atmosphere. Today was not just a workshop, it was a radical invitation to embrace a new way of working. As the session unfolded, she navigated the pushback, standing firm in her resolve to foster a culture of vulnerability and authenticity. Emma felt her confidence blossom, her passion threading through each activity, each conversation. Little did she know, however, that this dynamic shift would ignite unexpected contention, leading her to a revelation that would challenge her understanding of leadership itself. As the session wrapped up and the dialogue deepened, her heart pounded. Would her colleagues embrace this new direction, or was she unwittingly opening Pandora's box? The real test of her leadership loomed just ahead, echoing the question that now lingered in her mind: was she ready to confront the forces within her team that clung to resistance as fiercely as they embraced their individual ambitions? As the final activity of the workshop approached, Emma felt both exhilaration and anxiety. The tension between her team members had become almost palpable, a living entity swirling around them, but she was determined not to let it derail the progress she had made. They were skating on thin ice, and one wrong step could shatter the fragile connections forged in these previous exercises. "Thank you for your openness today," Emma began, her voice steadier than she felt. "For this last part, I want us to reflect on our motivations in our roles within this team. I believe it's important to not only know our values but to also articulate them to one another. This can strengthen how we work together." As her colleagues took their turns sharing their motivations, each narrative unveiled layers of complexity. Greg spoke passionately about wanting to innovate and leave a mark on the industry. Carl touched on his desire for recognition, not just for himself, but for his team, instinctively shifting the focus to collaboration. But then the conversation turned back to Barbara, who seemed increasingly agitated. I appreciate that everyone has their personal reasons, she said, her tone clipped and unyielding. But let us focus on actionable insights. Are we here to create a touchy-feely environment, or do we want to produce results in a timely fashion? Emma felt the tension coil tighter. This was more than just a disagreement, it was a confrontation that threatened to unravel all her efforts. Barbara, I believe this is actionable, she replied, clenching her fists to resist the urge to raise her voice. Understanding why we do what we do is foundational to any strategy. When we know ourselves and each other better, we can achieve results that are not only effective but meaningful. The room echoed with uncertainty. For every nod of agreement, there were equally skeptical glances cast in Barbara's direction. The discomfort was like watching a high-wire act, teetering between collaboration and chaos. Emma had envisioned this transformational workshop as a turning point, yet it felt like she was facilitating a quarrel rather than a conversation. A thought nagged at her, was she truly prepared for the implications of instilling this new culture? What if her vision was mistaken? In that moment of self-doubt, a flicker of fierce clarity ignited in her. She would not falter under scrutiny, she had to stand her ground. Let us reflect on our aspirations, the impact we want our roles to have moving forward, she challenged. Sometimes the feelings we shy away from can propel us to greatness. They encourage us to push beyond our comfort zones. If that is not a pathway to results, I don't know what is. As she spoke, Emma felt a shift in the room, tentative, but perceptible. One by one, faces softened, and expressions shifted from indignation to contemplation. It wasn't just her voice reverberating, something larger was sparking curiosity, a willingness to explore the unknown. Yet, Barbara's response was swift and cutting. You're romanticizing the concept of vulnerability. We're here to build a business, not share a therapy session, she retorted, her voice betraying a hint of panic beneath her bravado. The air crackled with tension. Each breath seemed to hold the weight of Emma's resolve. She took a step towards Barbara, and the silence that hung between them felt both threatening and liberating. This was a pivotal moment, a challenge that could either fracture her leadership or solidify it. Suddenly there was a burst of laughter, emerging from Carl, who tried to lighten the atmosphere but stumbled over his words. The awkwardness broke the tension like glass shattering, and a few responses rang out in solidarity, slowly turning the mood, but Emma knew they weren't out of the woods yet. Aware that every eye was on her, Emma decided to embrace this chance to rally her team rather than retreat from conflict. Every team faces friction, it's a sign we care. For us to reach out potential, we need not just the technical skills, but the emotional intelligence to navigate. That's what separates good teams from great ones. And I believe we have what it takes, she declared, raising her chin slightly. The confidence in her voice began to permeate through the group. Emma saw Greg nodding, and Carl's encouraging smile emerged. But would they challenge Barbara, or would the old dynamics resurface when faced with the prospect of genuine connection? The workshop's purpose was evolving within her grasp, but uncertainty loomed larger than ever. With the energy in the room shifting toward a potential breakthrough, Emma knew that she would have to navigate the treacherous waters ahead carefully. With her heart racing, she dared to confront Barbara once more. Why are you committed to working here, Barbara? What do you hope to achieve? The room held its breath as the question hung heavy, the next inevitable confrontation crackling just below the surface. Emma's own resolve was tested further, anticipation thick as fog. Would she unlock the door to dialogue, or would she find herself caught in a storm? Emma squared her shoulders. Facing Barbara head-on was a gamble, and she could feel the stakes rising with every passing second. The room held its collective breath, wrapped tight in attention. Barbara's expression wavered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I want to make an impact, she started, her voice steadying. But impact doesn't come from this, she gestured dismissively toward the group. It comes from results, numbers, measurable success. As Barbara spoke, Emma realized that vulnerability had opened a door, but the truth inside was tangled. What if your version of impact is a roadblock for others? What does success look like for you, and at what cost? Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but it held a steady fierceness that echoed off the walls. A cold stillness enveloped the room, compelling. Had she gone too far? Yet, Barbara's eyes sharpened. I'm not afraid of challenging situations. I thrive on them. But if you think softening in meetings will soften our performance, then I'm starting to see why we're struggling. Emma's heart pounded at the audacity of Barbara's retort. It was the first time that she could remember feeling genuinely threatened in a professional setting. She took a deep breath, checking the surge of frustration that threatened to break free. You've made important points, she replied, her voice firm yet composed. But being a leader isn't just about saving face or getting results at any cost. True leadership is about engaging with your team, creating an environment where everyone can contribute. You don't lose strength through collaboration, you lose it through isolation. The weight of her own words struck Emma deeply. She was standing before resistance, and as exhilarating as that felt, fear rippled beneath. She questioned every line of defense she had built while fighting for a culture of connection. How much momentum would this workshop create, and could she sustain it against Barbara's fierce stance? In that moment of vulnerability, Emma glimpsed a deeper connection to her own journey. Growing up, she had learned the hard way that running from conflict didn't turn it into resolution. It merely turned it into a shadow that loomed larger over her every decision. Yet here, in this workshop, facing Barbara, she had a chance to rewrite that narrative. Let us seek a balance, Emma proposed, her voice becoming more resolute. We can produce results while also valuing our shared contributions. If we don't allow ourselves to be human in this process, we risk becoming mere cogs in a machine. Who wants to work like that? Not everyone is a machine, that's for sure, came Greg's voice, breaking the tautness in the air. But we're not at a therapy session either. We can be real without dropping the ball on productivity. He looked at Barbara as if trying to draw her in. It was a clever pivot. Emma felt the energy shift once again. A small sliver of hope threaded through her, buoyed by Greg's alignment. But it wasn't enough yet. She needed everyone on board, not yet settled into the comfort of apathy, with old habits bubbling beneath the surface. Let us leverage what we've discussed, she pressed. Can we agree to set clear goals that reflect our individual and team aspirations? What if each of us committed to being accountable for our contributions while also nurturing this new culture? Barbara frowned, but the crowd murmured in contemplation. Emma had noticed a softening at least among the others. That could work, Carl chimed in slowly. If we see both sides as valuable, we might just find a middle ground. The tension felt electric, the atmosphere fragile yet charged with possibility. Emma leaned into the moment, heart in her throat. What do you say, Barbara? Can we start this challenge together? The eyes in the room flicked to Barbara, now the fulcrum of their collective fate. Emma's question hung suspended, a challenge thrown into the fray, masked with a glimmer of hope. Would Barbara see the merit in this new path? Could she trade her apprehension for collaboration, recognizing that both drive and emotional connection could coexist? Emma's heart raced as she awaited her response, uncertainty thick in the space around them. But just as she braced for Barbara's answer, a sudden realization struck like a lightning bolt in Emma's mind. This wasn't merely about changing Barbara's perspective, it was about confronting her own deeper motivations as a leader. What was she truly willing to sacrifice to shatter the status quo? The room held its breath, and Emma could almost see the narrative spiraling toward an unforeseen climax. Just then, Barbara opened her mouth, ready to respond. Barbara's mouth clamped shut as the silence stretched, an unbearable weight that bore down on Emma's chest. Her heart raced beneath the pressure, thoughts colliding like waves. Did Barbara recognize the shift to pivot from a position of power to one of collaboration? As Emma's mind buzzed with anticipation, a flicker of resentment surfaced. Why should she need validation from Barbara? Emma had spent countless evenings refining her approach and strategizing how to foster a more engaged workplace. Yet there she stood, vulnerable and exposed, waiting for approval from someone whose values conflicted with her own. the room was still, and Emma noticed fleeting glances exchanged among her colleagues, expressions of curiosity, apprehension, and a hint of solidarity. They were silently weighing Barbara's response, and Emma felt a surge of responsibility wash over her. If this wasn't just about her anymore, if she could truly lead, she would need to channel the collective energy in the room. "Barbara," she began, her voice slicing through the silence, "I understand your focus on performance. But isn't it time we redefine what that means? Performance driven by fear is fundamentally flawed. We can build an environment where creativity thrives, and in turn, so do our results." A flicker of something crossed Barbara's face. Surprise? Challenge? Emma couldn't decipher. She pressed on, captivated by the swell of determination coursing through her. Given recent trends, cultures fostering collaboration are proving to outperform traditional models. We can come to the table with both results and emotional intelligence. What if we create a system that holds us accountable without sacrificing our humanity? Just as she finished, Barbara crossed her arms, a defensive posture striking against Emma's plea. "You really believe adding these human elements won't hinder our ability to deliver? Our clients don't care about our feelings, they care about the bottom line. I don't think you see how complex this industry is." Emma inhaled deeply, centering herself amidst the whirlwind of conflict. Doubt flashed momentarily but was doused by clarity. This was her moment. "Perhaps that's the crux of it, Barbara. You're right, we're in a competitive landscape. Yet, what if addressing the needs of our team means better service, ultimately attracting and retaining clients? By investing in our human side, we build a brand that resonates deeply and sustainably with our clientele." The murmurs among her colleagues intensified, signaling the crack in Barbara's facade. Emma could feel the energy tightening like a bowstring ready to snap, so she took a leap, crafting her argument with precision. "What if we pilot a project where we incorporate these ideals and measure our output over time? If it fails, I'll take full responsibility. But if it succeeds, we may just redefine our future." Barbara's brow furrowed, weighing the risk with a furrow of doubt. Just as Emma thought she might break through, her phone buzzed, sending a ripple of distraction across the room. It was an alert about corporate restructuring. Anxiety flickered in the eyes of her colleagues. Would leadership choose change, or lean deeper into the status quo? With each tick of the clock, Emma felt the tension amplify, the enriched ambience now morphing into a heavy storm cloud hanging over them. The implications of a shift lingered, contingent on Barbara's response but equally dependent upon Emma's resolve. The room waited, breaths held as Barbara glanced at her team, gauging their reactions. Emma's pulse raced, she had come too far to retreat now. This moment was bigger than just them, it was an opportunity to redefine their reality together. "Emma," Barbara began slowly, her tone sharp yet contemplative. "You challenge me in a way I didn't anticipate. But you must understand that willing change requires more than just ideals. How far are you prepared to go to see this through? How much of yourself will you commit?" A chill swept through Emma. This was the question that made everything visceral. It wasn't just about designing a new path, it was about the sacrifices she would need to make, the clarity cutting through the doubt, shaping the very foundation of her leadership. "More than I thought possible," Emma replied, a steadiness anchoring her tone. "But if I'm to challenge myself, I need the support of this team you included. Can we do this together?" As the last word hung in the air, Emma steeled herself for a response while building anticipation among her peers. This exchange held promises veiled within uncertainties, reshaping the stakes, igniting passions. What would Barbara ultimately decide? She shifted her gaze back to Barbara, poised for the unfolding future, now littered with both peril and possibility. What lay ahead could redefine not just their workplace, but the very essence of Emma's understanding of leadership. Would Barbara ascend from her fortress, or would she double down on her existing power, leaving Emma to reevaluate her mission? The sun broke through the glass-plated walls of the conference room as it dawned on Emma that her moment of truth had arrived. No longer the janitor's daughter but a force in her own right, she felt empowered by the journey that had converged in that room filled with anxious tension and palpable stakes. Facing Barbara, she held her ground, defining unequivocally the principles that would guide her leadership going forward. "Let us forge a new path together, Barbara," Emma stated, her confidence shimmering like light splitting through a prism. "I am prepared to lead authentically and prove that merging empathy with results can transform not just this team, but how we approach business at its core." The silence was deafening for a heartbeat, and then, as if a dam had broken, murmurs swept through the room. Barbara's tension shifted, her expression softening ever so slightly. It became evident to Emma that they had reached a pivotal moment. "Fine, Emma," Barbara conceded, her voice much less steely now. "Let us pilot your project. But we must set realistic, measurable goals." The ripple of agreement among her colleagues felt like solidarity blooming where discord had reigned. Emma's spirit soared as she realized the empowerment blossoming around her wasn't just about her success, it was a collective evolution. Each voice that joined in asserting the importance of blending emotional and technical prowess felt like a victory won not just for her, but for everyone in the room. Over the next weeks, Emma took on the role of project lead with both enthusiasm and clarity. The transformation of the team was undeniable. One by one, her colleagues began to open up, share personal narratives, and redefine their shared objectives. Everyone became invested in this emotionally intelligent system. They saw that productivity did not solely hinge on numbers, it resided deeply in the connections they fostered. The workshop became a blueprint, leading to measurable success across projects, and the once tense atmosphere evolved into a collaborative culture. Feedback loops tightened, and with every meeting, the energy ignited further initiatives that propelled everyone toward their potential. Emma had not only redecorated the corporate ethos, she had restored dignity to the individuals therein. External recognition soon followed. The company thrived, clinching awards for innovative leadership practices. Emma stood tall during the announcement, her heart swelling with pride as James articulated how her vision had enriched the organization. This was not just her personal victory, it echoed across the structures of power that had once felt so foreign to her. She was recognized not only as a contributor but as a trailblazer, a cornerstone of transformation. Reflecting on those moments, Emma savored the strides she had made. From trembling hands in the corporate restroom to captivating a room full of executives, she had obliterated the self-limiting narratives that once confined her. Now, she relished in being seen, heard, and respected not for her origins, but for the value she provided. She transformed fear into trust, fostering a space where each voice mattered. As the final acknowledgement of her growth, she received an invitation from the executive board to present her innovative framework on integrating emotional intelligence into professional environments at an industry conference. It was the confirmation of her worth. No longer was she an intern, she was a leader ready to share her story. Emma smiled, excitement surging through her. This was her achievement. She had not only conquered doubt, she had manifested a new reality for herself, rooted in authenticity and courage. The girl who scrubbed floors alongside her father's cleaning business had risen to not only influence a corporation but to inspire an industry. It was her moment to shine, and as she stood at the precipice of this new opportunity, she embraced the prospect of sharing her journey with others eager for transformation, eager to rise above their preconceived limitations. Emma had arrived. Authoritative, confident, and complete. Now, I urge you. If you're touched by Emma's journey and want to uncover more transformational stories, subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional narratives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this incredible ending, and finally, you must share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting our channel through these actions.